In the heart of Arkansas, beneath the whispering trees and crystal lakes, lies a cave with secrets darker than night. On August 18th, 15-year-old Tim Smashfield squeezed into Devil's Den, chasing a thrill that quickly spiraled into a nightmare. Alone in the cold rock, with pain gripping his leg and darkness closing in, time slowed and survival hung by a thread. What began as a twin brothers' day of adventure turned into a desperate race against death underground. This is not just a story of courage, it's a chilling reminder of how quickly nature tests our limits when curiosity goes too far. Before we dive into video, please subscribe our channel. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Tim and Tom were 15-year-old twin brothers who loved going on adventures together. They lived in Arkansas, a place full of forests, hills, and lakes, where they had spent most of their childhood exploring. Both boys were brave and curious, always looking for new places to discover. They had been excited for weeks about a new trip to a place called Devil's Den Cave. People said it was dark, deep, and full of narrow spaces, but that only made it more exciting for them. Tim was always a little more daring than Tom, often the one to take risks. Even though they were young, they felt like experienced explorers. On August 18th, the day they had been waiting for finally arrived. With their backpacks ready and flashlights in hand, they set off on what they thought would be another fun adventure, not knowing it would soon turn into something far more dangerous. Tim and Tom began their journey early in the morning, filled with excitement and energy. The trail to Devil's Den Cave was long and surrounded by thick forest. The trees stood tall on both sides of the path, and the sunlight barely made its way through the leaves above. Birds chirped in the distance, and the sound of insects filled the warm summer air. As they walked, the ground beneath them changed from soft dirt to uneven stones, making it harder to keep balance. But the boys were used to tough paths and kept moving without complaint. They passed by several small, clear lakes where the water looked like glass. Sometimes they stopped for a moment to admire the view or take a sip of water. The deeper they went into the forest, the quieter it became. The peaceful silence made the whole place feel magical, like they were stepping into another world. Finally, after hiking for hours, they reached the entrance of Devil's Den Cave. It looked like a huge black hole in the side of a hill. Cold air poured out from the opening, giving them chills even on a warm day. They stood in front of it, staring into the darkness. There was a strange mix of fear and excitement in their eyes. Without saying a word, the brothers turned on their headlamps and stepped into the cave. They didn't know it yet, but their real journey was just about to begin, and it would test them like never before. As Tim and Tom stepped into Devil's Den Cave, the light from outside quickly faded behind them. Their headlamps lit up only small parts of the cave at a time, but that was enough to show its strange and beautiful features. The walls were smooth in some places and jagged in others, shaped by years of water slowly cutting through the rock. Small crystals sparkled when the light hit them just right, and drops of water fell from the ceiling, making soft echoes in the still air. The deeper they walked, the cooler the air became. It was almost silent inside, except for the sound of their footsteps and their quiet voices. Every few minutes, they stopped to look around or talk about which path to take next. The cave was like a maze with many tight tunnels and steep drops, but that didn't scare them. They had explored many caves before and felt confident in their skills. Tim led the way, moving quickly and carefully. He often looked around with a curious eye, searching for hidden corners or passages. Tom followed closely behind, making sure they stayed safe and didn't go too far off their planned route. They worked well together, each trusting the other. At one point, they came across a wide chamber with a high ceiling. It felt like standing in a secret room deep underground. The walls glittered with minerals, and the silence was so deep it almost rang in their ears. They both stood quietly for a moment, taking it all in, but this peaceful moment didn't last long. Not far from this chamber, they would find something that would change everything. A narrow crack in the wall caught Tim's attention, and from there, their adventure would take a dangerous and unexpected turn. As Tim and Tom continued exploring the cave, they came across a narrow crack in the wall. It was about 9 inches wide, barely enough space for a person to fit through. Most people would have ignored it, thinking it was too small or too risky to enter. But Tim's eyes lit up the moment he saw it. He had always been the more curious and adventurous twin. He wanted to know what was on the other side, even if it meant squeezing through tight, dark rock. Tom looked at the crack and shook his head. He didn't like the idea. It seemed dangerous and not worth the risk. "Let's stick to the open paths," he suggested. But Tim was already examining the edges, trying to see how deep it went. "I'll just check it out quickly," he replied, brushing off Tom's concerns. Before Tom could stop him, Tim turned sideways and slowly began pushing himself into the crack. The rock pressed against his chest and back, and he had to twist his body just to move forward. Tom stood nearby, nervously watching. He didn't want to leave his brother alone, but there was no way he could follow. He was too big to fit. Tim kept crawling, determined to explore the narrow path. He believed it would lead to something exciting or undiscovered, but he didn't realize how risky this choice truly was. Every inch forward took him deeper into a space that would soon become a trap. His curiosity had taken control, and now danger was just around the corner. As Tim pushed deeper into the narrow crack, the space around him grew even tighter. The rock walls were rough and cold, pressing against his body from both sides. He had to twist and stretch just to move forward a little at a time. The passage was only 9 inches wide, 20 feet long, and about 15 feet high. Barely enough room to breathe, let alone turn around. Still, Tim kept going, focused on the idea that something exciting might be waiting at the end. But then, something went wrong. His foot suddenly slipped on a loose piece of rock near the bottom of the crevice. Before he could catch himself, his left leg dropped into a tight space and got stuck between 2 sharp rock faces. His other leg, already in a strange position, slipped too, causing his body to stretch painfully. The more he moved, the worse it got. His leg was now jammed, twisted, and crushed by the heavy rock. Tim tried to stay calm, but panic rose quickly. He shouted for Tom, his voice echoing off the stone walls. The pain in his leg was sharp and growing stronger with each second. He couldn't move up or down, and the pressure on his trapped leg made every breath feel harder. His body was stuck in an awkward, painful position, and he could feel the weight of the cave pressing in. He was no longer exploring. He was trapped deep underground, alone, and in serious trouble. Tom froze for a moment when he heard Tim's cry echo from deep inside the crevice. His heart started racing. He leaned over the edge of the crack, trying to see his brother, but the narrow space and darkness made it almost impossible. "Tim, can you hear me?" he shouted. Tim's voice came back, weak and full of pain. He was stuck, and he couldn't move. Tom knew right away that this wasn't something he could fix by himself. The space was far too tight, and any wrong move could hurt Tim even more. Without wasting another second, Tom turned and ran. He raced out of the cave, through the thick forest they had hiked earlier, jumping over rocks and tree roots. His mind focused only on one thing: getting help. The warm air felt heavy around him, but he didn't slow down. Time was against him, and every second mattered. His legs ached, his lungs burned, but he kept going. By 5:30 p.m., Tom finally reached the park's visitor center. Out of breath and clearly panicked, he told the park rangers what had happened. The rangers, Jeremy Bruce and Tim Scott, listened carefully, grabbed their rescue gear, and followed Tom without delay. They knew every minute counted. As they hiked back toward the cave with Tom leading the way, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The forest that had once felt peaceful now seemed darker, heavier. When they reached the cave entrance, the cold air rushing out seemed like a warning. The rangers didn't waste time. They turned on their lights, adjusted their gear, and followed Tom into the cave, ready to face whatever was waiting in the tight, dangerous passage where Tim was trapped and quickly running out of options. Rangers Jeremy Bruce and Tim Scott moved quickly through the cave, following Tom's directions to the narrow crevice where Tim was trapped. As they reached the spot, they immediately realized how serious the situation was. Tim was much deeper in the crack than they had expected, and the space was so tight that even seeing him clearly was difficult. His voice echoed faintly from below, filled with pain and fear. The narrow angle and the depth made it impossible for either ranger to reach down and pull him out by hand. They knew brute force wouldn't work. If they tried to yank Tim upward without care, they could easily make his injury worse or cause him to slip even deeper into the crack. The pressure on his leg was already intense, and Tim was barely able to move. The rangers decided to use a tool called tubular webbing, strong climbing rope designed for tight rescues. They tied one end into a loop and carefully lowered it down to Tim, instructing him to wrap it under his arms. Despite the pain, Tim managed to follow their directions, his hands trembling as he worked. With the webbing in place, Bruce and Scott tried to pull him up, but the angle of Tim's body, the narrow walls, and the force of his trapped leg made it nearly impossible. Tim cried out as pain shot through his leg with each tug. It was clear this wouldn't be a quick rescue. Realizing they needed more help, Ranger Bruce called for backup and requested specialized cave rescue teams. Time was running out, and the cave was growing darker and colder. What had started as a simple hike had now become a dangerous and delicate mission to save a boy caught in the unforgiving grip of the earth. As soon as Ranger Bruce called for backup, the park's emergency system went into action. He contacted Jesse Cox, the park superintendent, and explained the situation in detail. Cox immediately arranged for a trained cave rescue team to assist. These rescuers were experts in handling dangerous underground situations, especially where tight spaces and injuries were involved. By 7:50 p.m., the team arrived at Devil's Den Cave, fully equipped with advanced tools, ropes, medical kits, and lighting gear. They knew the risks, but they also knew how to handle them. The rescuers gathered around the crevice and quickly discussed a plan. Pulling Tim sideways through the narrow gap wasn't an option. The rock walls were too tight and jagged. The only safe way to get him out was to lift him straight up. But this had to be done with great care. If they pulled too hard or too fast, his injuries could become worse, or he could get wedged even deeper. They decided to use the webbing again, but this time with a new approach. One of the rangers, Bruce, carefully climbed onto a small ledge above the crevice, positioning himself directly above where Tim was stuck. He slowly lowered the webbing down again, speaking calmly to Tim and guiding him step by step. The plan was to wrap the rope under Tim's arms and pull him straight up, keeping his body stable as much as possible. Tim, exhausted and in serious pain, did his best to follow instructions. The rescuers knew they had only one chance to get it right. Every movement had to be slow and steady. Everyone worked together, focused and silent, knowing that one boy's life depended on their strength, skill, and timing deep inside that cold, dark crack in the earth. With the rescue plan in place, the team prepared for the most delicate part of the operation, lifting Tim straight up through the narrow crevice. Ranger Bruce, still positioned above Tim on the small ledge, carefully lowered the loop of webbing. His voice was calm and steady as he encouraged Tim to slip it beneath his arms and around his chest. Every small movement caused Tim immense pain, but he pushed through it, knowing this was his only way out. Once the rope was secured, the rescuers began to pull, inch by inch. It was slow and exhausting. Tim's body fought against the rough rock walls, and his trapped leg resisted every attempt to move. Sharp pains shot through his knee and ankle with each tug. He gritted his teeth, holding back screams as the rope tightened under his arms. The rescuers paused often, adjusting the angle and making sure Tim's body wasn't twisting the wrong way. They knew any sudden movement could injure him more or make the situation worse. The cave was silent, except for the sound of strained breathing and the occasional creak of the rope under tension. After what felt like forever, Tim's trapped foot began to loosen. A few more careful pulls, and he was finally free from the rock's grip. Slowly, he rose higher until Ranger Scott was able to reach down and grab his arm. With one final effort, they pulled him out completely. It was 8:20 p.m. Tim was covered in dirt. His legs were bruised and swollen, but he was out, alive, safe, and surrounded by the people who refused to give up on him. The cave had nearly taken him, but teamwork, skill, and courage had brought him back. As Tim lay on the cave floor, finally free from the narrow crevice, he could hardly believe what had just happened. His legs throbbed with pain, and his body was sore and bruised, but he was alive, and no longer trapped. The rescuers quickly checked him for serious injuries. Amazingly, despite the pain and swelling, nothing was broken. With great care, they helped him out of the cave, guiding him step by step through the dark tunnels and back into the cool night air. Outside, the forest that had once felt like a playground now seemed unfamiliar and quiet. Tom rushed to his brother's side, relieved and emotional. The two shared a brief hug, both shaken but grateful to be together again. Back at the visitor center, Tim received medical attention and rest. Everyone, Tom, the Rangers, and the rescue team, felt the weight of what they had just been through. It had been a long, risky, and emotional journey, but their efforts had saved a life. Tim's story became a powerful reminder of how quickly adventure can turn into danger. It also showed the strength of teamwork, calm thinking, and bravery in the face of fear. For Tim and Tom, the experience changed how they saw the world. They still loved exploring, but now they understood just how important it is to respect nature and to know when to be cautious. Devil's Den had tested them, but they had survived, and that was a story they would never forget.